Conor Lamb's approach to his Pennsylvania congressional campaign could become a template for a cluster of more moderate Democrats contesting conservative-leaning seats in other states. Drew anger. Getty Images. The strong performance of the Democrat in a special House election in southwest Pennsylvania, once a stronghold for President Trump, has emboldened Democrats to run maverick campaigns this fall, even in deep red areas where Republicans remain bedeviled by Mr. Trump's unpopularity. The battle for a district in suburban and rural areas around Pittsburgh, which Mr. Trump carried by nearly 20 percentage points in 2016, exposed the degree to which both parties are weighted down by divisive leaders, Democrats by Nancy Pelosi, the House Minority Leader, Republicans by Mr. Trump and Paul D. Ryan, the Speaker of the House. But just as vividly, the race showed that only one party appears willing to grapple with the implications of campaigning under a radioactive figurehead. In Pennsylvania, Conor Lamb, a 33-year-old Marine Corps veteran from a local Democratic dynasty, said early that he would not support Ms. Pelosi to lead House Democrats and played down his connections to his national party. He echoed traditional Democratic themes about union rights and economic fairness, but took a more conservative position on the hot-button issue of guns. Throughout the race, Mr. Lamb said he welcomed support from people who voted for Mr. Trump, and he saved his most blunt criticism for Mr. Ryan, highlighting the Speaker's ambitions to overhaul Social Security and Medicare. Lamb's approach could become a template for a cluster of more moderate Democrats contesting conservative-leaning seats in states like Arkansas, Kansas and Utah. Hungry for gains across the political map, Democrats in Washington have urged their candidates in states like these to put local political imperatives above fealty to the national party, even tolerating outright disavowals of Ms. Representative Mike Doyle of Pennsylvania, a veteran Democrat from a neighboring district, said Mr. Lamb had benefited from buyer's remorse among Trump supporters and had wisely tailored his message to the conservative-leaning area. Rick Saccone, the Republican candidate, campaigned chiefly as a stand-in for President Trump, endorsing the president's agenda from top to bottom. Drew anger. Getty Images. This guy has made a lot of promises that aren't being kept, Mr. Doyle said of the president. Mr. Doyle said he had conferred with Mr. Lamb about the question of supporting Ms. Pelosi and urged him to vote his district. He suggested other Democrats in conservative seats might follow Mr. Lamb's approach. Some parts of the country, that may be a good strategy, said Mr. Doyle, the state's senior-most Democratic lawmaker. Lamb's Republican opponent, Rick Saccone, meanwhile, campaigned chiefly as a stand-in for Mr. Trump, endorsing the president's agenda from top to bottom. He campaigned extensively with Mr. Trump and members of his administration and relied heavily on campaign spending from outside Republican groups that attempted to make Ms. Pelosi a central voting issue. Conservative outside groups also sought to promote the tax cuts recently enacted by the party, but found that message had little effect. Yet at midday on Wednesday, Mr. Saccone trailed by just over 600 votes with only a handful of ballots yet to be counted. He has not conceded and could conceivably challenge the results through litigation. In a meeting with House Republicans on Wednesday, Representative Steve Stivers of Ohio, who leads the party's campaign committee, described the race as too close to call, according to a person who heard his presentation. But Mr. Ryan and Mr. Stivers also called the election a wake-up call for Republican lawmakers, telling them that they could not afford to fall behind on fundraising, as Mr. Saccone did. Mr. Lamb raised $3.9 million and spent $3 million, compared to Mr. Saccone's $900,000 raised and $600,000 spent as of February 21. But Republican outside groups swamped the district. Between conservative super PACs and the National Republican Congressional Committee, Mr. Saccone had more than $14 million spent on his behalf. Lamb got just over $2 million. As Republican lawmakers spilled out of their morning conference meeting, few seemed willing to come to grips with how much Mr. Trump is energizing Democrats and turning off independent voters. Some of them even argued that Mr. Saccone only made the race close thanks to the president's rally in the district on Saturday. The president came in and helped close this race and got it to where it is right now, said Mr. Others in the conference, however, talked more openly about the political difficulties of breaking with Mr. Trump. There is no benefit from running away from the president, said Representative Patrick McHenry of North Carolina, a member of his party's leadership, noting that Republican candidates need core conservative voters to sharpen. This constituency still backs the president. It doesn't get them the same thing as Lamb opposing Pelosi, said Mr. McHenry. But Mr. Lamb's margin and the turnout level